The girl handed a drawing to the ice cream vendor. He fell to his knees, crying. Robert Johnson felt his hands tremble as he saw the paper being held out toward him. The little girl with curly hair and a sweet smile was holding a simple drawing, but it made his world collapse in seconds. It was an ordinary child's drawing made with crayons, but it showed something he hadn't seen in a long time: a rainbow over two figures holding hands beside an ice cream cart. The 62-year-old man fell to his knees right there in the neighborhood playground of Hope Village in Chicago, unable to hold back the tears streaming down his wrinkled face. Little Lily, just 7 years old, was startled by the reaction of the man she always saw passing by with his cart in the late afternoons. She had made that drawing especially for him after weeks of noticing how sad he seemed, never smiling at anyone. "Uncle, didn't you like my drawing?" the girl asked, her voice full of concern. Robert tried to regain his composure, but the memories that simple piece of paper stirred were too strong. For 15 years, he had sold ice cream on the streets of that neighborhood, always following the same route, always at the same time. People knew him as the quiet man who never spoke more than necessary to sell his popsicles. "I did like it, sweetheart," he managed to say, his voice choked. "I liked it very much." Jennifer, Lily's mother, watched the scene from their porch and decided to approach. She worked as a nurse at County General Hospital and was used to handling delicate situations, but the man's reaction puzzled her. "Lily, come here," she called, stepping down the 3 stairs of the small blue house where they lived. "Mom, I just gave a drawing to the ice cream man. He was crying," the girl explained, not understanding why her mother seemed worried. Robert stood up slowly, wiping his face with the back of his calloused hand. He held the drawing as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Jennifer came closer and got a good look at the man who had passed by their street every day for years, but whom she had never spoken to. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing how shaken he seemed. "I am, ma'am. Your daughter." "She has a very kind heart," Robert replied, carefully folding the paper and tucking it into the pocket of his faded plaid shirt. What neither Jennifer nor Lily knew was that the drawing had touched a wound Robert had carried for over 30 years. The rainbow on the paper was identical to the one his own daughter used to draw when she was little, before he made the mistake that would change their lives forever. That afternoon, Robert strayed from his usual route for the first time in years. He couldn't focus on work, selling only a few popsicles before deciding to head home early. He lived alone in a small rented room 5 blocks from the playground, a simple but clean place where he kept his only treasures, a shoebox full of drawings neighborhood children had given him over the years. That night, for the first time in a long while, Robert opened the box and spread the drawings across the small Formica table. Each one represented an attempt to fill the void left in his life when he abandoned his family. Lily didn't know it, but her drawing had just joined over 100 others, all kept with the tenderness he had never been able to give his own daughter. Jennifer, meanwhile, couldn't stop thinking about the ice cream vendor's strange reaction. She mentioned the incident to her mother, Margaret, 68, who had lived with them since her husband passed away 2 years earlier. "Mom, something strange happened today. Lily gave a drawing to that ice cream vendor who comes by every day, and the man started crying." Margaret stopped washing the dinner dishes and turned to her daughter. Her face went pale for a moment, as if she had seen a ghost. "What's this ice cream vendor like?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "A man in his 60s, grey hair, always wears a plaid shirt." "Why, Mom?" Margaret dried her hands on the dish towel, her heart racing. "After all these years, could it be—" "Oh, nothing, dear, just curious," she replied, but her mind was far away. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next day, Robert arrived early at the playground. He hadn't slept well, thinking about the little girl's drawing and its unsettling resemblance to the ones his daughter used to make. He decided he needed to talk to the child again, maybe to understand why it had affected him so deeply. Lily was playing on the small playground when she heard the familiar sound of the ice cream cart's bell. She ran toward Robert with a radiant smile on her face. "Uncle Robert, you came back," she shouted, using the name she'd heard Jennifer mention the day before. Robert was surprised. It was rare for anyone to remember his name, let alone a child. "Hi, sweetheart. I came to thank you for yesterday's drawing. It was very special to me." "Why were you crying?" Lily asked with the blunt honesty of children. Robert crouched down to her level, something he never did with customers. He always kept his distance, sold his product, and moved on. But there was something about this child that completely disarmed him. "Because it reminded me of someone very important I lost a long time ago," he answered, choosing his words carefully. "Someone in your family?" Lily's innocent question hit Robert like a punch to the gut. He swallowed hard before answering. "Yes, my daughter. She liked to draw rainbows too." "And where is she now?" Robert fell silent for a long moment. How could he explain to a 7-year-old that he'd abandoned his own daughter when she was just 2? How could he say that his cowardice and fear of not being a good father had led to the biggest regret of his life? "She lives far away," was all he managed to say. Lily noticed the sadness in the man's eyes and, with the sensitivity only children possess, reached out her small hand and touched his arm. "If you want, I can make more drawings for you, so you won't be sad." Robert felt his eyes well up again. The kindness of this little girl was almost unbearable, especially because she reminded him so much of his daughter at that age. "You're very sweet, Lily, but you don't have to worry about me." "Of course I do. Grandma Margaret always says we have to take care of each other, especially the older folks." The name Margaret sent a chill down Robert's spine. Could it just be a coincidence? Margaret wasn't such a common name among women Lily's grandmother's age. He tried to hide the unease washing over him. "Your grandma sounds like a very wise woman," he remarked, fishing for more information. "She's the best grandma in the world. She's the one who taught me to draw. She said when she was young she had a daughter who loved to draw too." Robert felt the world spin around him. The pieces of a puzzle he'd tried to ignore for years were falling into place in a terrifying way. "And how old is your grandma?" 68. "Why, Uncle Robert?" 68. The exact age his ex-wife Margaret would be today. Robert had to lean on the ice cream cart to keep from falling. Could it be that after all these years, after 15 years of selling ice cream in this same neighborhood, he was talking to his own granddaughter? "Lily, what's your mother's full name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Jennifer Margaret Wilson. Why do you want to know?" Wilson. She'd gone back to her maiden name. Robert knew it at that moment. He was looking at his granddaughter, the daughter of the baby he had abandoned over 3 decades ago. The man had to sit down on the playground bench. His legs wouldn't hold him up anymore. Lily, concerned, sat beside him. "Uncle Robert, are you feeling sick?" "No, sweetheart. I'm just very surprised by something I found out." Margaret watched from the window as the ice cream vendor talked with her granddaughter. There was something familiar about that man, something that had bothered her since the day before. When she saw Lily sit beside him on the bench, as if they were old friends, she decided she needed to see this up close. She walked slowly toward the playground. With every step she took, her heart beat faster. There was something about his profile, the way he moved his hands, that stirred painful memories she'd rather keep buried. When she was about 5 feet away, Robert looked up and saw her. Time stopped. 32 years melted away in an instant, and he was face to face with the woman he had loved and hurt more than anyone should ever hurt another. Margaret froze where she stood, her legs trembling. Even with the grey hair and the wrinkles time had given her, she recognized immediately the man who had left her alone with a 2-year-old. "Robert," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Margaret," he replied, slowly rising from the bench. Lily looked from one to the other, confused by the sudden tension in the air. "Grandma, do you know each other?" Margaret couldn't tear her eyes away from Robert. All the bitterness, all the pain, all the anger she thought she'd overcome came rushing back. At the same time, she saw in him the man she'd fallen in love with at 20, the father of her child, the person she had both loved and hated most in her life. "Lily, come here," Margaret said, reaching for her granddaughter without looking away from Robert. "But Grandma, I was talking to Uncle Robert. He's really nice." "Now, Lily," Margaret repeated with a firmness the girl rarely heard. Robert stood motionless, watching his ex-wife lead away the granddaughter he had just discovered he had. The irony was cruel. For 15 years he'd sold ice cream through these very streets, dreaming of the day he might run into his daughter or find out where she was. And now he learned not only that his daughter lived here, but that he had a granddaughter who, without knowing it, had touched his heart with a simple drawing. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. Jennifer could tell something was wrong with her mother, but Margaret didn't know how to explain that the ice cream vendor who passed by their house every day was the father Jennifer barely remembered, the man who had left them when Jennifer was just a baby. "Mom, are you okay? You've been so quiet since you came back from the playground with Lily." Margaret looked at the daughter she'd raised alone, remembering all the nights Jennifer had asked about her father, all the times she'd made up excuses to justify his absence. How could she tell her now that the man Jennifer wouldn't even recognize had been just a few feet from their house every day? "Jennifer, I need to tell you something important. About your father." Jennifer stopped folding the clothes she was organizing and looked at her mother carefully. "What about Dad? You hardly ever talk about him." He didn't die in an accident like I always said. He left us when you were 2. The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "What do you mean, he left? Why did you lie to me my whole life?" Margaret sighed deeply. She knew this day would come, but she never imagined it would be under such unexpected circumstances, because it was easier for you to grow up thinking he had passed than to know he chose to leave. You used to ask about him so much when you were little, and I didn't know how to explain that your father decided he didn't want to be a dad. Jennifer sat heavily in the chair. Her whole life had been built on a lie. "And why are you telling me this now?" Margaret took a deep breath before dropping the final bombshell. "Because he's here. He's the ice cream vendor who comes down our street every day." Jennifer was in complete shock. The man she saw daily, whom she'd never paid much attention to, the one her daughter had decided to gift with a drawing, was her father. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I recognized him today when I picked up Lily from the playground." Does he know it's us?" "I think he found out today too. His reaction when he saw Lily yesterday makes sense now." Jennifer brought her hands to her face, trying to process all that information. She felt anger, confusion, sadness, and, strangely, a flicker of curiosity about the man who had fathered her. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Honestly, I don't." Meanwhile, on the other side of the neighborhood, Robert wandered the empty streets with no clear direction. He couldn't go home, couldn't stop thinking about the devastating discovery he'd made. His granddaughter, the sweet, kind child who had given him a drawing, had grown up without even knowing he existed. He thought of all the times he'd passed that blue house, all the missed chances to watch his daughter grow up, build a family, become a mother. He thought of all the birthdays, graduations, and important moments he'd lost because of his own cowardice. When he finally got home, it was past midnight. He grabbed the box of drawings and dumped them all onto the bed. He searched until he found the oldest ones, the ones he'd kept for over 10 years. Many were of rainbows, happy homes, smiling families. Now he understood why he'd held onto them so dearly. Unconsciously, each drawing represented the family he'd lost. The next day, for the first time in 15 years, Robert didn't go to work. He couldn't face the possibility of running into Margaret or Jennifer, didn't know how to react if Lily came to talk to him again. He locked himself in his room, reliving every wrong decision he'd ever made. At the Blue House, Lily was inconsolable. "Why didn't Uncle Robert come today? I made him a new drawing." Jennifer looked at her daughter, unsure what to say. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that the man she'd chosen as a friend was her grandfather, the man who'd abandoned the family before even knowing her? "Lily, sometimes people have to miss work," she tried to explain. "But what if he's sick? What if he needs help?" The girl's genuine concern touched Jennifer's heart. Lily had formed a bond with Robert in just 2 days, something he hadn't managed with his own daughter in 2 years of living together. Margaret watched the exchange, wrestling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she was furious at Robert for all the tears she'd shed, all the nights she'd wondered if she hadn't been a good wife, if she hadn't been attractive enough to keep him. On the other hand, seeing how much Lily cared for him confused her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 3 days passed without Robert appearing on the street. Lily kept asking about him, and Jennifer began to feel guilty for depriving her daughter of something that clearly made her happy, even if she didn't fully understand why. On the 4th morning, Jennifer made a decision. She left Lily with Margaret and went looking for Robert. It wasn't hard to find him. She just asked other local vendors where the ice cream man lived. When she knocked on the door of the small room he rented, her heart raced. He was about to come face to face with the father he hadn't seen in over 30 years. Robert opened the door and froze when he saw Jennifer standing before him. She was even more beautiful than he had imagined, with delicate features that reminded him of Margaret in her youth, but with a strength in her gaze that was uniquely her own. "Hi," Jennifer said, unsure how to begin. "Jennifer," Robert whispered his daughter's name like a prayer. "Can we talk?" Robert motioned for her to come in, but Jennifer shook her head. "I'd rather it be somewhere public. The playground, maybe." He understood. After abandoning them, he didn't deserve the trust of being alone with his daughter. He grabbed his keys and followed her to the playground where everything had begun just days before. They sat on the same bench where Robert had spoken with Lily. The silence between them was heavy, weighed down by 3 decades of absence. "Why did you come back?" Jennifer finally asked. "I never left," Robert replied, confusing her. "What do you mean?" "I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, Jennifer. Every day I walked past your house waiting. I don't even know what I was waiting for." Jennifer stared at him, trying to understand. "You knew it was us?" "No, not until I met Lily. But something brought me here. Something kept me here all these years." "My daughter has been asking about you for 3 days. She's worried." Robert's chest tightened. His granddaughter, who barely knew him, was worried about him. "She's a special girl." "She is. And she doesn't deserve to suffer because the adults around her are complicated." The indirect criticism didn't escape Robert. "You have every right to hate me, Jennifer. I deserve it." "It's not hate I feel," she said, surprising herself with her honesty. "It's confusion. My mother raised me believing you had died in an accident. 3 days ago I found out it was all a lie, that you chose to leave us. And now I learn you've been here for 15 years, selling ice cream on my street. And I never knew." Robert lowered his head, shame weighing on his shoulders. "I was too young when you were born. I was 22 and terrified of the responsibility. I thought you'd be better off without me." "Without you?" Jennifer's voice rose. "Do you have any idea what it was like growing up without a father? Do you know how many times I wondered if there was something wrong with me? Some reason my father didn't love me enough to stay?" Her words cut through Robert like knives. He had caused exactly the kind of pain he'd tried to avoid by leaving. "I thought I was doing the right thing. Your mother was so strong, so capable. I was a mess. I worked at a factory, barely made enough to support you, and Margaret deserved someone better." "But she loved you," Jennifer burst out. "Even after all these years, even after all the pain you caused, I could see she still had feelings for you. Why do you think she never married again?" Robert looked at Jennifer in surprise. "She never. She raised me alone, worked twice as hard to give me an education, gave up her own life for me. And you were here, 3 miles away, living your life as if we didn't exist." "You don't understand," Robert said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "I never lived. These 15 years have been penance. Every day I walked past your house, torturing myself, wondering how you were, if you'd grown up well, if you were happy. Every drawing kids gave me, I saved, imagining they might have been yours." Jennifer fell silent, processing her father's words. "You have a granddaughter who adores you without even knowing who you are," she finally said. "Lily talks about you like you're a hero. She says you have sad eyes and that she wants to make you happy." Robert closed his eyes, fighting back tears. "She doesn't know who I am." "Exactly. She only sees a kind man who seems to need affection. That says a lot about who you've become, not who you were at 22. They sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. What do you want, Jennifer? Robert finally asked. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wants to hate you for what you put us through, but another part sees how my daughter reacted to you and wonders if maybe it's not too late for us to try to understand all this. And Margaret, what does she think? My mom is just as confused as I am. She spent 30 years of her life creating a version of you in her head to explain to me why you weren't there. Now she has to face reality. Robert stood up from the bench and began pacing. I tried to come back a few times, you know, in the early years after I left, but I always lost my nerve before knocking on the door, and after Margaret moved from the house we lived in, I couldn't find you. We moved when I was 5, to the house we live in now. I searched for years. I even hired a private detective once, but he couldn't find any trace of you. Jennifer looked at him in surprise. Really? Margaret went back to her maiden name. You changed schools, neighborhoods. It was like you'd disappeared. And you gave up? Robert stopped pacing and met her gaze. I never gave up. That's why I started working as an ice cream vendor. I could travel all over the city, get to know every neighborhood, hoping I'd bump into you by chance one day. And it worked, didn't it? Jennifer said with a hint of irony. Only took 15 years. The worst 15 years of my life, Robert admitted. Jennifer let out a deep sigh. Look, I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully forgive you. This pain of growing up without a father won't disappear overnight, but my daughter likes you, and she's never had a father figure in her life. Her dad also left us when he found out I was pregnant. Robert felt a stab of anger. His daughter had gone through the same thing he'd put Margaret through. I'm sorry, Jennifer. You didn't deserve to go through that twice. Life can be cruel sometimes, but maybe this is a chance to break that cycle. Lily doesn't have to grow up without a grandfather like I grew up without a father. Robert's heart leaped in his chest. Jennifer was offering him a chance, an opportunity to know his granddaughter. You'd let me, even after everything. With conditions, Jennifer said firmly, and Margaret has to agree too. After all, she was the one who suffered the most when you left. What kind of conditions? First, no lies. If Lily asks who you are, we tell her the truth in a way she can understand. Second, you can't disappear again. If you decide to be part of her life, it's for good. She's already lost one father. She can't lose a grandfather too. Robert nodded vigorously. I swear, Jennifer, I'll never leave again. Third, you'll have to earn my mom's trust all over again, and that won't be easy. She's held on to that hurt for 30 years. I know, and I'll try if she lets me. Jennifer stood up from the bench, signaling the conversation was over for now. I'll talk to her. I can't promise anything, but I'll try to make her see that maybe we all deserve a second chance. Jennifer, Robert called as she started to walk away. Yes? Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I know I don't deserve it. It's not for you, she said with brutal honesty. It's for Lily. She deserves to know her family, even if that family is complicated. That night, Jennifer had the hardest conversation of her life with Margaret. Her mother listened in silence as she recounted the meeting with Robert, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. He said he never stopped looking for us? Margaret finally asked. That's what he said. And I believe him, Mum. I saw it in his eyes when he talked about you, about me. It wasn't a lie. Margaret got up from the kitchen chair and went to the window, looking toward the playground where it had all begun. 30 years, Jennifer. 30 years I hated that man. 30 years I raised you alone, wondering where I went wrong, why I wasn't enough for him to stay. And now I don't know what to think. Seeing him with Lily, seeing how much she cares for him, it's confusing. The question is, can you forgive him? For yourself, for me, for Lily? Margaret stayed silent for a long moment. I don't know if I can forgive him completely, but maybe I can try, for our little granddaughter. The next day, Robert was back on his route but hesitant to pass by the Blue House. He didn't know if Jennifer had talked to Margaret, didn't know if he'd be welcome. When he reached the playground, Lily was there waiting, as if she knew he'd show up. She ran toward him with a radiant smile. "Uncle Robert, I knew you'd come back. I missed you." Robert knelt to her level, feeling his heart fill with a love he hadn't known in decades. "I missed you too, sweetheart. Look, I made another drawing for you," Lily said, holding out a colorful paper. This time the drawing showed 3 women and a man holding hands in front of a blue house. Robert understood immediately. It was the family as Lily saw it now, including him. "It's beautiful, Lily, thank you." "Uncle Robert, can I ask you something?" "Of course, my dear." "Do you know my grandma Margaret and my mom Jennifer?" Robert looked around and saw Margaret and Jennifer approaching. It was the moment of truth. "I do, Lily. In fact, I have something very important to tell you." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Lily sat beside Robert on the bench, her little legs swinging in the air, as Margaret and Jennifer walked closer. The moment they had all feared and waited for had arrived. "Lily," Robert began, choosing his words carefully, "you know every family has a story, right?" "I do. Mom always tells me stories about when she was little." "That's right. And sometimes those stories are sad, but they can have happy endings too." Margaret was close enough now to hear the conversation. Her heart pounded, but she had made a decision during her sleepless night. She would give Robert a chance to explain everything to Lily for her granddaughter's happiness. "What kind of sad story, Uncle Robert?" "Well, a long time ago I was married to your grandma Margaret, and your mom Jennifer is my daughter." Lily stared at Robert with wide eyes, then at Margaret and Jennifer, trying to process the information. So you're my grandpa?" "I am, sweetheart. Your grandpa who was gone for a long time, but never stopped thinking about you." "But why were you gone?" "Grandpas don't stay away from their grandkids." The innocent question cut through the hearts of all the adults present. Robert took a deep breath. "Because I made a very big mistake when your mom was a baby. I was afraid I wouldn't be a good father, and I thought they'd be better off without me. But I was wrong, Lily. Very wrong." "And now you want to stay close?" "If you'll let me, I'd love to be your real grandpa." Lily looked at Margaret and Jennifer. "Grandma, Mom, will you let him?" Margaret stepped forward and sat on the other side of Lily. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Your grandpa hurt us very much when he left. But everyone deserves a second chance, right, Grandma?" "You always say that." Margaret looked at Robert over her granddaughter's head. In his eyes, she saw the same pain she had carried in her own heart for 30 years. "Yes, sweetheart, yes. Everyone deserves a second chance." Jennifer joined the group, forming a family circle that was together for the first time. "But it won't be easy, Lily," said Jennifer. "We need to learn how to be a family again." "I can help," declared Lily with the confidence only children possess. "I know how to make everyone happy." Robert couldn't hold back his tears. His granddaughter, just 7 years old, was willing to mend a family he had shattered. "How would you do that, sweetie?" "First, Grandpa Robert needs to come over for dinner. Second, Grandma Margaret has to teach him how to make chocolate fudge because hers is the best in the world. Third, Mom will tell her stories from when she was little. And fourth, I'll make more drawings for everyone." Lily's simple plan brought smiles to the 3 adults. It was innocent, but maybe exactly what they needed: simplicity and unconditional love. "And you, Grandpa Robert, need to stop being sad," Lily continued. "Now you have a family to take care of." Robert took his granddaughter's small hand in his. "I promise I'll try, Lily. I promise I'll be the best grandpa I can be. And I'll teach you how to smile for real," she declared, gently touching his face. Margaret watched the interaction between Robert and Lily, feeling something unexpected. Hope. Maybe it was possible to rebuild what had been broken. In the days that followed, the family began a delicate process of reconnection. Robert was invited to dinner at the Blue House, sitting at the table he should have occupied decades earlier. At first, conversations were tense, filled with uncomfortable silences. Lily, however, was the glue holding everyone together. She chattered non-stop during meals, talking about school, her friends, her drawings. Gradually, her infectious joy began melting the barriers between the adults. Margaret discovered Robert had kept a photo of her and Jennifer in his wallet all those years. It was a picture she didn't even remember taking, from when Jennifer was just a year old. Knowing he had carried her image for 3 decades moved her more than she wanted to admit. Jennifer, in turn, began seeing in her father not the man who had abandoned them, but someone who had carried guilt and regret for decades. His stories about searching for them all those years made her realize he had suffered just as much as they had, maybe even more. A month after their reunion at the playground, the family faced their first real test. Lily was participating in a school presentation about family trees and wanted to include Robert in the project. "Grandpa Robert, can you come to my presentation?" she asked during dinner. Robert looked at Margaret and Jennifer, uncertain. "If your mom and grandma don't mind." "Of course you can come," said Jennifer. "You're part of the family now." The word family came out naturally, surprising even Jennifer. At some point during those weeks, Robert had stopped being the man who abandoned them and simply became the father and grandfather trying to make up for lost time. At school, when Lily presented her family tree, including Grandpa Robert among her relatives, he quietly cried in the audience. It was the first time in 30 years someone had introduced him as part of a family. After the presentation, Lily's teacher, Mrs. Williams, approached them. Lily always talked about her grandpa, but we'd never seen him before. "It's a complicated situation," Jennifer explained diplomatically. "I understand. Families can be complicated sometimes, but it's beautiful to see how you support each other." On the way home, Lily held Robert's and Margaret's hands, skipping between them. "Now everyone at school knows I have 2 grandparents," she said proudly. Robert stopped walking. "2 grandparents?" "Of course. Grandpa Robert and Grandpa Carlos, who is the father of my friend Tyler's mom. He sometimes lives with us." Jennifer smiled, seeing the confusion on Robert's face. "She considers Mr. Thompson from next door a grandpa too. He's always been kind to her." "I see," Robert said, but he felt special for being officially included in Lily's family. That night, as Robert prepared to return to his rented room, Margaret made an unexpected decision. "Robert, how about staying for breakfast tomorrow? I can make those pancakes you used to love." It was the first time in a month that Margaret had referenced the past they'd shared as a couple. Robert felt his heart race. "You still remember the pancakes?" "I remember a lot of things, Robert, good and bad. And can you remember the good without the bad hurting so much?" Margaret considered the question carefully. "I'm learning. Seeing you with Lily, seeing how you've changed, it's getting easier to separate the man you are now from the young man who left us." The next morning, when Robert woke up on the living room sofa, Margaret had insisted he didn't need to go home so late. He was greeted by the smell of pancakes and Lily's beaming smile. "Good morning, Grandpa. Grandma Margaret made special coffee for you." Robert walked into the kitchen and found Margaret setting the table with a care he hadn't seen in decades. There were even flowers in the center, yellow daisies his favorite. "You remembered the daisies," he said, moved. "Lily helped me pick them. She said yellow is the color of happiness." During breakfast, something magical happened. For the first time since their reunion, the 3 adults talked naturally without tension or resentment. Lily told jokes she'd learned at school, making everyone laugh genuinely. "Grandpa Robert, do you want to help make lunch?" Lily asked. "Grandma Margaret will teach you." Margaret hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. Of course, Robert was always a disaster in the kitchen, but maybe it's time he learned. "Hey," Robert protested playfully. "I've improved over the years." "Really? What can you make?" "Ramen and ramen." The answer made everyone laugh, and Margaret shook her head with mock exasperation. "You definitely need lessons." As they cooked together, Margaret teaching Robert how to season the beans properly, Jennifer watched from the table. She saw how the 2 interacted with a familiarity that transcended their years apart, as if part of them had never forgotten how to be a couple. "Mum, can I say something?" Jennifer said when Lily went out to play in the yard. "Of course, sweetheart. You still love each other, don't you?" The question caught Margaret and Robert off guard. They looked at each other for a long moment. "It's complicated, Jennifer," Margaret finally answered. "I didn't ask if it was complicated. I asked if you still love each other." Robert set the wooden spoon on the counter and turned to Margaret. "I never stopped loving your mother, Jennifer. Not for a second in all these years." Margaret felt her eyes well up. "Robert, it's true, Margaret. I know I have no right to say it after everything I did, but it's the truth. You're the love of my life, always have been." Jennifer smiled, seeing the emotion on her mother's face. "What about you, Mum? How do you feel?" Margaret looked at Robert, then at Jennifer. "I feel like part of me could never forget the love I had for him. But I'm also scared, Jennifer. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of you all getting hurt." Robert stepped closer to Margaret. "I understand the fear, but I promise you this. If you give me a chance, I'll spend the rest of my life proving I've changed, that I won't run from problems anymore." "How can I be sure?" "Because now I know what it's like to live without you, and it's a hell I never want to experience again." Lily ran into the kitchen just then, interrupting the intimate moment. "Why is everyone crying?" she asked, worried. "They're happy tears, sweetheart," Jennifer explained. "Sometimes people cry when they're happy." "Oh, like when I got my new doll for my birthday." "Exactly like that," said Margaret, picking up her granddaughter. That afternoon, while Lily took a nap, Margaret and Robert walked to the playground where it had all begun. They sat on the same bench where Lily had given him her first drawing. "Robert, I need you to understand something," Margaret said. "If we're going to try again, it has to be different. We can't just go back to how we were before. I know, we're different people now. We are. I've become stronger, more independent. I'm not the 20-year-old girl who depended on you to feel complete anymore. And I admire that strength in you. I always have, really. It was one of the things that intimidated me when we were young." "Intimidated you? You always knew exactly what you wanted from life. You were decisive, brave. I felt inadequate next to you." Margaret considered his words. "Maybe if you'd told me that back then, things would have been different. Maybe. But we can't change the past, only learn from it." They sat in silence, watching the children play in the playground. "So now what?" Margaret finally asked. "Now I'd like to ask for a chance to win you back. Not as the insecure young man who left you, but as the man I've learned to be in these years without you." Margaret smiled for the first time since they'd reunited. "And how do you plan to win me over, Mr. Johnson?" "Starting slow. By being the best grandfather I can be for Lily, the best father I can be for Jennifer now, and showing you every day that you can trust me." "What if I told you that maybe, just maybe, you've already started winning me back?" Robert's heart leapt in his chest. "Really? Seeing you with our granddaughter, seeing how much you care for her, how you want to make up for lost time, it's hard not to be moved." "Margaret, But it'll be slow, Robert. Very slow. I need to be sure. Take all the time you need. I have the rest of my life to make up for those 30 years. 3 months passed, and the family had settled into a routine. Robert had lunch with them on Sundays, dinner on Wednesdays, and always showed up for Lily's school events. He'd also moved to a bigger apartment, closer to the Blue House. The relationship between him and Margaret was slowly evolving. They weren't the young, impulsive couple from before, but something more mature, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Jennifer watched her parents rediscover each other and felt something she hadn't experienced since childhood, the feeling of having a complete family. One day, she arrived at work and found a wrapped box on her desk. Inside was an empty photo album and a note. "So we can start making new memories together. With love, Dad." It was the first time Robert had called her his daughter in writing. Jennifer cried right there at County General Hospital, comforted by co-workers who didn't understand why she was crying over an empty album. That night, she showed the gift to Margaret and Lily. "He wants to start making new memories with us," she said, still emotional. "What do you think?" Margaret asked. "I think it's a beautiful idea. We already have some photos from the last few months. Lily with him at school, the 4 of us having dinner. 4? Margaret interrupted. Of course, Mom. We're a family of 4 now. Margaret smiled. Jennifer was right. Somehow, despite everything, they'd become a family. The following weekend, Robert showed up with a new camera. I thought we could take some photos for the album, he said, a little shy. Lily clapped her hands in delight. Yes, let's take lots of pictures. One with everyone together, one with just the grandpas, one with just the women of the family. The women of the family? Robert laughed. Of course, me, Mommy and Grandma Margaret. We're the most important women in your life, right, Grandpa? Robert looked at the 3 generations of women before him and felt his chest swell with love. You sure are, my dear, the most important in my life. They spent the afternoon taking photos, laughing, creating memories to make up for, at least a little, all the ones they'd lost. When the photos were developed a week later, Robert noticed something. In every single one, they looked genuinely happy. Margaret was organizing the photos in the album when she found a special one. It was of her and Robert cooking together, Lily between them at the counter, all focused on the cake batter they were making. Jennifer had taken the picture without them noticing. This one is perfect, Margaret murmured to herself. Which one? Robert asked, coming closer. This one, it looks like a real family. Because we are a real family, Margaret. She looked at him fondly. Yes, we are. A little complicated, a little wounded, but real. And I wouldn't change a thing about this family, Robert said, kissing her forehead tenderly. It was the first kiss between them since their reunion, soft, respectful, full of promises for the future. Robert, Margaret called. Yes? I forgive you. Completely. The words Robert had waited 3 decades to hear finally came. He hugged her, feeling as if a giant weight had lifted from his shoulders. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for giving me this second chance. Thank you for waiting for it, Margaret replied. I'd have waited forever for you. Jennifer walked into the room just then and saw her parents embracing. She smiled, remembering the little girl who had always dreamed of having a whole family. Am I interrupting something? She teased. No, Margaret said, stepping back slightly, but keeping Robert's hands in hers. Actually, we have news for you. What kind of news? Robert and Margaret exchanged a glance, communicating silently like only couples who've known each other for decades can. Your father asked me to be his girlfriend yesterday, Margaret said, blushing like a teenager. And I said yes, Robert added quickly. That is, if you're okay with it. We don't want to do anything that makes you uncomfortable. Jennifer looked at them, seeing how nervous they were for her approval. You're asking for my permission to date? Well, yes, Robert said. You're our daughter. Your opinion matters. Jennifer threw her arms around both of them, hugging them tight. Of course I'm okay with it. I've always wanted you both to be happy. And Lily? Margaret asked. What will she think? As if summoned, Lily appeared in the room, still sleepy from her afternoon nap. What are you all doing? She asked, seeing the group hug. We have news for you, sweetheart, Jennifer said. Grandpa Robert and Grandma Margaret are going to date. Lily looked at them for a moment, processing the information. Does that mean Grandpa Robert can sleep over here sometimes now? The adults laughed at the child's simple logic. Maybe when we're ready for that, Margaret said. Yay, then I can make breakfast for both of you, Lily declared. I know how to make toast. Burnt toast, Jennifer corrected, teasing. I don't burn it anymore, only sometimes. The family laughed together, and Robert thought about how life could take unexpected turns. A year ago, he was a lonely man selling ice cream on the streets, carrying guilt and regret. Now he was part of a loving family, dating the love of his life again and being grandfather to the sweetest little girl in the world. 6 months later, Robert and Margaret married in a simple ceremony in the backyard of the Blue House. Lily was the flower girl, scattering daisy petals along the path, while Jennifer was the matron of honor. The justice of the peace who married them remarked that he had never seen a happier couple. After the ceremony, as everyone enjoyed the cake made by Margaret herself, Lily approached Robert with another drawing. This is my wedding gift for you, Grandpa. The drawing showed the family gathered in front of the Blue House, but this time there was something new. an ice cream cart parked out front, and a small sign that read Johnson Family Ice Cream. "Lily, this drawing is beautiful. But why did you draw the cart?" "Because now we're a real family, and you don't have to sell ice cream alone anymore. We can sell it together." Robert looked at Margaret and Jennifer, seeing the same surprise and emotion on their faces that he felt. "Would you like that, Lily? To sell ice cream with Grandpa?" "Of course, and we can make special flavors. Grandma Margaret's chocolate fudge ice cream, Mommy's cake ice cream, and happiness ice cream for everyone." Margaret stepped closer and hugged Robert from behind. "Happiness ice cream?" she asked. "Yes," said Lily, "because now everyone is happy." And she was right. For the first time in over 30 years, Robert was truly happy. He had his family back, a second chance at love, and a granddaughter who loved him unconditionally. 2 years later, the family did open a small ice cream shop near the playground where it all began. Johnson Family Ice Cream became a neighborhood favorite, not just for its delicious flavors, but because people could feel the love that filled the place. Lily, now 9 years old, helped after school, inventing new flavors with the creativity only children possess. Margaret managed the finances and created the special recipes. Jennifer helped on weekends, and Robert had finally found his true calling, not just selling ice cream but spreading joy. On the shop's wall, framed, were all the drawings Lily had made over the years, including the first one, the rainbow that changed everything. There were also family photos, showing the evolution of their story, from the tense early dinners to Margaret and Robert's wedding. One afternoon, a new customer entered the shop with her little daughter. The girl chose a popsicle and, before leaving, handed Robert a drawing. "My mum said you like drawings," the girl said shyly. Robert took the paper, a simple sketch of a happy family, and felt his eyes well up. Some things never changed. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll treasure it." Lily, who had been watching, walked over to her grandfather. "Grandpa, do you still get sad when you get drawings?" Robert looked at his granddaughter, then at Margaret and Jennifer, happily working behind the counter, then at the shop filled with happy families, and smiled. "No, my dear. Now they make me happy, because they remind me of how our family began." "With my rainbow drawing?" "Exactly. The drawing that brought me home." Lily grinned and went back to work, inventing another impossible flavor with the seriousness of a master chef. Robert tucked the new drawing into the special drawer behind the counter, alongside hundreds of others that no longer represented a desperate attempt to fill a void, but the continuation of a family tradition that had started with a simple rainbow. That evening, as they closed the shop, Margaret took Robert's hand. "Any regrets?" she asked, as she sometimes did. "None about being here with you," he replied, as always. "Only regret for the years we lost. But look what we've built with the years we have," she said, pointing to Jennifer and Lily, who were organizing the girls' art supplies. "That's true. And we still have many years ahead." "Many," Margaret agreed. "And many drawings to receive, and many ice creams to make, and many memories to create." Robert kissed his wife gently, thanking fate once again for giving him a second chance. Some stories have happy endings, even when they seem to have started with the worst mistakes. Sometimes, all it takes is a brave child willing to hand a drawing to a stranger and a heart open to accepting forgiveness when it finally comes. The end. So, what did you think of this story of second chances and forgiveness? Let us know in the comments which part moved you the most and whether you believe every family deserves a fresh start. Don't forget to like and subscribe